Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Articulate Storyline workshop. These are the sessions where you vote for what we build, and today it looks like the winner is an interactive animated slide with narration. It won with almost 75% of the votes. So if what you voted for did not win, that will be an option at the session 2 weeks from now, and we will eventually get to everything. So thank you, everyone who voted. Today, we will build this interactive animated slide with narration. So we have an hour, so we will need to move relatively quickly, and this slide will have to be relatively simple because there's only so much we can get done in an hour when we are starting from scratch. That being said, you are more than welcome to follow along if you have Storyline open. It might make more sense though for you to just watch through this first time, maybe take some notes, and then play this back when you're watching the recording if you actually want to follow along step by step and build it. And if you have questions, feel free to ask questions about what we're doing as we go. I know I can move quickly sometimes, but there are many people in the audience in the chat who can also share insights and help answer questions. So if you do know your stuff, please help people in the chat as you can, since we will be moving somewhat quickly. And as always, we will start with the basics and slowly get more complex. So let's dive into this. I'm going to share my screen with Storyline open, and we will get this party started. Okay, so here we are. I just have I just opened up Storyline, nothing special, and I selected new project so that we are here in the interface. Okay, so I'm going to double click into this slide to open it. Let's zoom out a little bit. And if you've been to any of these sessions before, you know I always like starting by changing the aspect ratio so that instead of this like squarish slide, we have a nice wide rectangle, the same aspect ratio as a video. So to do that, we are going to go to the Design tab at the top of Storyline, and then we will select this Story Size button. Okay, so that was in the top left. And on this screen, this is where we can actually change that aspect ratio and layout. So I'm going to change it to 16:9, and I'm going to make my width 1280. Okay, so 1280 by 720, that's exactly what we want. Once you have this set, we'll press OK, and now you can see our screen is widescreen. It's the same aspect ratio as like a YouTube video. So this is what we're going for. Next thing we will want to do is start adding elements to this page. So I was before this session, I was just trying to think of something simple we could do. And since the content isn't very important here, we are focusing on the programming. I was thinking we could just do like learning more about two different characters. So like select each character to learn more is the idea. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab and then go to Photos. Oh, no, that's for the content library, sorry. Insert and then Picture. And from my desktop, I have these two images that I prepared just before the session. So here are these nice images, as you can see. These are going to be the characters that we learn more about. Obviously, they're too big right now, so I'm going to select both of them. I'll select one, and then I'll hold down the Shift key and select another. And then I will just drag from the top left corner and size it down a bit. I think that's still a bit big. So we size that down even more. Maybe it's a little small now, but we will see how this goes. I want them to probably be at around the middle of the screen, so I'm just selecting them. I'm going to the Format tab, and then I'm selecting this Align Middle button. And when only one thing is selected, it will align it to the middle of the artboard or the actual slide. So I'll select that again. Now they're both vertically aligned in the middle of the screen. And if we're looking at these images, we can see that this guy is facing to the right, leading us into the next picture. And this woman is kind of facing like off the page. So it's kind of like leading us, off of the screen, which isn't where we want to look. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to reflect this image so that she's facing the other way. And we'll do that also in the Format tab with this image selected. We'll select Rotate and then Flip Horizontal. So when we select that, we see now they're facing each other. I'm just going to move these around a bit to make this layout a bit more where we want to go. I'm going to move it over this person. We'll see if the sizing looks right. Sorry. I feel like we can probably size this one down just a tiny bit. I'm going to vertically center it again. I think that's looking good. A little bit more. And again, if anyone has any questions or are moving too fast, feel free to ask. I know there are a mix of beginners and experts here, so trying to find a pace that works well for everyone. And I'm going to move these characters down a little bit because now we want some sort of heading or text. Patty asked where the images are from. It's where I always get images from. I mention it on like every crowdcast. I'm not like an affiliate for these people or anything, but it's starting to seem like that. It's from this getillustrations.com website. They have all these nice illustration packs. I just bought it on like a Black Friday sale, and then this is that Humanic pack. You can get like every single one of these bundles for like $200, and then you can use them however you want. So yeah, like you can see more of this pack. Before the session, I was just looking at all of these and trying to pick a couple of images for the session. But yeah, they're pretty cool. So that is where the images are from. Good question. Okay, so now let's add some sort of instruction, I would say, some sort of heading so that we know what to do. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab and then select Text Box. And now I'm just going to click at the top of the screen somewhere. So I want this text to say, select each person to learn more. Clearly don't have a ton of context here. I don't think we need it. Again, we're just showing off the programming. I'm going to change the font to Futura PT Bold, which is the brand font I always use like on my site and everything. Let's play around with the sizing to get that looking good. Once again, I want to center this on the slide. So I'm going to, with the text box selected, I'm going to select this Align Center button under the Format tab. Okay, and when I'm in a text box, you can see like when the lines are dashed and I try moving like up or down or left and right, it's only going to try to move me along the text. But when I press the Escape key on my keyboard, now you can see that those dashed lines go solid. And now I can treat this like an object. So when I press the Up key on my keyboard, it actually moves it up on the slide. So useful thing to know for if you're just getting started. I'm going to actually size this up maybe a little bit more. Enter it again. Looks good. Okay. So we have this instruction now. I think we can move these images down a little bit just to give us a bit more space to breathe. We're looking pretty balanced right now, I think. The layout is pretty solid. You can see it kind of aligns with the edges of the photos. So I think we're doing good. I think we should give these people some names, though. Okay, so this is size 46, I believe. Okay, wait, is it like mixed? Oh. Okay. So I want to add a new text box beneath each person. So once again, I'm going to that insert and then text box option. Another option you can see when you hover over this, draw a text box or in parentheses, Control T. So let's say I don't click that, I can just put my mouse where I want that text box to start, and then I can press Control T on my keyboard, and it will just create a text box for me. So we will give this person a name. We'll say that they're Kyle. Futura PT Bold. We'll see how that looks. And let's go with font size. We will try 27. Or let's try 23, actually. Okay, so another trick. So you see if we have these two things selected, this text box is within the boundaries of the image above it. When that holds true, we can align this text box to this image however we'd like. So for example, if I wanted this text box flush aligned to the right of this image, I can select this Align Right button here in the Format menu, and it will align it to the right. If I want to bounce it back to the left, I can bounce it back to the left. But what I really want is I want it right in the center, so I'm going to press this Align Center button. Okay? So that's when you have two objects selected. Now I'm going to just go to the Home tab and make sure that this text is centered within the text box. Didn't change anything because there was no extra space here. And I feel like this is a little small. So let's actually size this up to 28. And then once again, I will align them centered. And we can probably move this up a little bit. All right, looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to bring it over here and we will name this woman Kelsey. And I will do the same trick just to make sure that this is center aligned here. Okay, maybe move it up just a tad more. And even though this is like mathematically centered, I think we can move it over a little bit to make it look more centered to the eye. Hey, I mean, we have some more white space here, so it looks a little low, but I think this looks fine. Any questions or feedback about this so far? How did I get the duplicate box? Okay, good question. Sorry, I do some things without thinking about it. So what I did is I selected this text box. Again, make sure it's not the dotted line, but the dashed line. So one way to do that is to press escape. Another way to do that is to select this bounding box with your pointer. So you see when I click, now it turns into this kind of box. So what I do is I drag it over. I hold down shift. Whoops. I hold down shift so that it stays like aligned, you see, so that's not going like above or below. And then I hold down control. So if I'm holding down control when I let go of my mouse, which I am right now, it will make a copy. Okay, so that's a good trick, a good workflow improvement if you're not familiar with that shortcut. All right. So now we have our instruction. I think we need some narration. Okay. Well, actually, let's add some narration so we know what's going on here. So what we can do is we can add this text-to-speech robot narration for now. So back when I used to work on a lot of client projects in Storyline that were narrated, we would start with the robot text-to-speech and wait until it was all like fully approved and finalized before going ahead and turning it and having a professional narrator record it, because it's very easy to change text-to-speech. It costs a bit more money and takes more time to change real human professional voiceover. So how we add this text-to-speak narration is to go to the Insert tab and then go to Audio, selecting that little drop-down, and then selecting Text-to-Speech. Okay? So now we'll have this nice text box where we can add whatever text we'd like. I see there's a question from Rich about rulers and guides. Yes, you can turn those on in Storyline. We can cover that in a bit. I don't usually use them, but they are possible. So you can see here the default text-to-speech. You can change the voices. We'll just go with the default Joanna. And what do we want to say? Do we just want to say select each person to learn more for now? Actually, we'll say meet Kyle and Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Or how about this? This is Kyle and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Okay? So I'm going to press insert now. This is Kyle and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. All right, so we can see now on our timeline, we have this nice audio, these waveforms. We can see when you look at these waveforms, these audio waves, you can kind of tell what's going on, okay? So if you've worked with audio before, this is going to seem very basic to you, but I know we're here from all different experience levels. But we can see now, this is Kyle. We know that this part right here is saying this is Kyle. We know this part right here is saying this is Kelsey, and we know this part is saying select each person to learn more. And by extension, we know that this part is probably saying select. This part is probably saying each. So when you work with these a lot, you can kind of see visually what is being said, which makes it easier to sync your visuals to the timeline without having to keep listening to it and taking notes and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, obviously today we're talking about animation as well. we can't talk about animation without talking about the timeline because the two are so closely tied together. Okay, so as soon as the timeline starts, as soon as this slide loads up, this timeline is going to start running. Okay, unless you do something to stop it, like with a trigger where you say pause the timeline. You see, it's going to keep running unless you have this trigger to pause the timeline when something happens, when like the timeline reaches 1 second or whatever it is. Okay. Nicole wants to preview the sound. Sure, Nicole. I think I need to stop sharing my screen and re-share it because when I did this, I forgot to include the system audio. Okay, share audio, screen 1. Here we go. Okay, let's see what we have going on so far.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
So it's very robotic. You would not really want this in a final product. Like there is research showing that people learn better from a human voice than a robot voice. This robot voice is just a placeholder. But obviously we have no animation going on right now, and I want to get rid of this menu. So you've seen me do this many times, but I'm just going to go to the Home tab on Storyline. I'm going to select Player. And right up here where it says Menus and Controls, I'm just going to turn that from on to off, and then I will select OK. Phil is pointing out that to preview the sound, you can use the play icon.
And this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
And then I just don't want the black bars on the right and left, so I'm going to change it from dark to light, and that should fix that. Okay. So now let's add some animation. Okay. So I want Kyle with his text label to come in at one point, and I want Kelsey with her text label to come in at another point. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these two things. So instead of applying animations to each of these things individually, I'm just going to press Control G on my keyboard with these two things selected to turn them into one group or one object. So now when we add an animation, it's animating the entire group. And since I know some of you may be new to this, let me just show you the difference. Okay, so I just press Control Shift G to ungroup this. Watch what happens when I add what one should we do? I mean, I think with grow, it will be really obvious. So watch this. Now there's a grow animation on each one of these items. So watch when we preview.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey.
So do you see how
select each person to learn more?
Each item grows in separately. Watch again.
This is Kyle. This is Kyle. This is Kyle. This is Kyle.
That is definitely Kyle. But yeah, so you see how they animate in separately. I'm going to get rid of these animations now. So now there is not an animation on either of these items. I'm going to press Control G on my keyboard to group these items. And now I will add that grow animation back and watch the difference.
This is Kyle, and this is
Kyle. So you see how now they animate in as one object instead of as two separate pieces?
Select each person to learn more.
It's very important to see the distinction and how you can use groups to make your animations function as you want them to. Okay, so groups are an important part of animations. So what I'm going to do is maybe we'll just go with a nice flow-in animation with a 0.5 second duration. Okay. Now, again, if this is your first time seeing this, we're in the animations tab. We can change what type of animation we want. This is for the entrance. So you see, these are the entrance animations. So this is what will play as soon as the timeline starts on this group. So if we move this group over to the 1 second march, he's not going to come in until we get to 1 second. So just watch. Again, just to demo this, it's pretty straightforward.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey.
There we go. Now, the duration, again, yeah, if you've used PowerPoint, this is simple, straightforward stuff. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it. I think 0.75 seconds is like very long for an animation on a desktop, right? Screens are pretty big. That's like a very slow and steady animation. I think most modern UI animations are between like 0.2 and like 0.1 and 0.4 seconds usually, but we'll just go with 0.5, okay? Patty's asking if I usually change the duration. Yeah, I usually change the duration to make it happen more quickly. And then you'll see for each one of these animation choices, you can select effect options to choose whether, in this case, whether it's floating up or floating down. But you'll see when we get into some other animations, you'll have different options on how it animates. But this is good for now. What we want to make sure now is that we time this up appropriately. Since the first thing our narrator is saying is this is Kyle, it's safe to have Kyle animate in as soon as that narration starts. But now we need to do the same thing for Kelsey. Okay, so I'm going to select the image, hold down Shift, and then select the text box. And we will add an entrance animation here. Same thing, we will float in, and we will do 0.5 seconds. Okay. Oh wait, I didn't group it for some reason. So I got rid of that. I'm pressing Control G. It's not doing anything. There we go. Okay, so this is grouped. I'm going to add this float in animation, and I'm going to change it to 0.5 seconds. So at this point, again, because we can look at this audio wave and we know that this piece right here is saying this is Kelsey, we can move this group over to where that audio wave begins. You see? So with that in place, now we just know that this last thing is this text box that says select each person to learn more. So that's the last thing we need to animate. We will select the text box. We will give it a float in animation. We will make it 0.5 seconds. But in this case, maybe we have it float down. Okay, so since these things are floating up and they're coming from the bottom, how about we have that text box float down towards the images? I think that will be a nice effect. So if we now, similarly, we'll go to where this item starts on the timeline down here at the bottom, and we will click and drag it over here to right before, right where that narration is going to speak. Okay, so let's play this and see how it looks.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay, so pretty rudimentary. I know if you're familiar with storyline, this is pretty basic. It's going to get more complex from here. So if anyone, I'm not following what's going on in the chat, but if anyone has any questions about this before you move on and it gets more complex, please let me know. But this is basically, yeah, like if you've used any kind of timeline-based tool like Camtasia, iMovie, Final Cut, Premiere Pro, this is just a rudimentary version of those kind of tools. Does this work for grouped items? Cher is mentioning select multiple items in the timeline and add the animations. Yeah, so for example, let me show you something. So let me click Kelsey, we'll get rid of this float animation. Let me click Kyle, we'll get rid of this float animation. So right now, when we see them, it will just be super choppy. Watch. Naturally.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey.
Okay, so we got rid of those animations. Now, if we wanted to add them back, we just select this one, hold down Shift and select this one. We can we're in the animations tab. We can add that float in animation, make it 0.5 seconds, and there we go. It's exactly back to how we had it. So if you're going to have these exact same animation settings, you can select all of the objects that will have it and then change them all together. You don't have to do it one at a time. So good question, good call out. Definitely don't do these one at a time if they're all going to be the same. That's just a waste of time. Okay, so that's the basis of interactivity and animations. It's going to get more complex because the next thing we need to do is we need to add some interactivity. And I want to give a little disclaimer here. I want to make this all work on this base layer, on this single slide, just to really drive home how the timeline works. It would likely make more sense to do something like this with layers, but we're going to avoid layers for now. Maybe we'll recreate it with layers at the end if we have enough time. But I wanna just build out this one slide so you can see get a really solid understanding of how the timeline works on one slide. Okay, so let's see how far we can get. Now we need interactivity. Okay, so I want to make it so that when someone clicks on Kyle, Kelsey kind of fades out of the screen or goes off of the screen. This goes off of the screen, and some text comes down that says "Meet Kyle," and we can see some bullet points or items stemming from Kyle that tells us more about him. Okay, so first thing we need to do is that we want to make it so that when we click this, something happens. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a transparent rectangle over this shape and tie the interactivity to this. This might sound confusing, but I'll try to explain my reasoning. If you get confused because you're new to Storyline, don't worry. How this is going to work is that when you click on this rectangle, it's going to move the timeline forward or bring the timeline to a specific point so that we can have these other animations appear about Kyle and the narration appear about Kyle. Now, if we just tie that to this image right here, this image is still going to be on the screen. So if the user accidentally clicked on this image again, it would just bring us back to that point in the timeline, and that is not what we want to do. Okay, so if that's confusing right now, don't worry, it might make more sense as we go, and it's just one of those things where when tying the interactivity to this image will lead to issues down the line. Another option, which some of you may be thinking who are more familiar with Storyline, is why aren't we using a hotspot? Okay, because you can add a hotspot over something. It looks like this green box, but it will be invisible to the user. That's fine. The reason we're not using a hotspot is because we won't be able to change that hotspot when we want. So you see, when we try to change the state of something to hidden, we can change the state of this rectangle to hidden once someone clicks it, because we don't want them to be able to click it again to bring us back to that same point in the timeline. But we are not able to change the state of a hotspot to hidden, so that's why this isn't going to work. We could animate it off the screen, but that's more work than it's worth. So if I lost you, don't worry. Just trust me when I say that a transparent rectangle is going to be our best option here. Okay, so I'm just going to right-click on this rectangle, format shape, and bring that transparency to 100%. Okay? Oh, and I think I'm getting behind on the chat. It's not scrolling down for me. Okay. So now that's 100% transparent. You will see we still see that outline. So I'm just going to select that again, and we're going to go to the Format tab at the top. We're going to select this drop down next to Shape Outline, and we're going to change it to No Outline. So there we go. It literally is an invisible button. That's what this rectangle is. And let's go ahead and actually change that. So we will name this Kyle button. So notice on the timeline, I just double clicked this default title and I changed it to Kyle button so that when we are trying to access it with the trigger panel, we can very quickly and easily grab this button. Okay, and yeah, exactly. So when we change the state of this to hidden, you still won't be able to see it, but this will make it so that it's not interactive. No one will be able to click it. That will be important for what we're trying to do. This will make more sense down the line. So if you're, watch back the recording if you're very new to this. It will make more sense the second time around once you see where we're going. Okay? Good. Do you need to save to prevent work loss? That's a good idea, Nicole. I'm going to do that. That's a smart move. So we'll go to the desktop. We will save this as just animated slide demo. Good suggestion, Nicole. Thanks for saving us some potential lost work. always good practice. Okay. So we have this button. Let's do the same button for Kelsey. So I'm going to use my trick again. It's harder to see now, but I'm going to click and drag this button over Kelsey. I'm holding down the control key on my keyboard. So when I let go, it makes a copy. I'm going to make it a little bit wider since this Kelsey illustration is a little bit wider. And this time I'm going to name the button Kelsey button. It looks like I accidentally made a duplicate along the way, so I'm just going to delete that. So now you can see on our timeline we have the Kyle button. When we click it, we can see where it is. If we click the Kelsey button, we can see where that one is. So we're doing well. Now, obviously, when the timeline is here at 0.5 seconds, we don't want both of these buttons to appear because we're going to add interactivity to these buttons, and we don't want someone to click it before it makes sense for them to do so. So I'm going to just hold down Shift and select this Kelsey button. So now that both of them are selected, and I'm going to drag them over to, we can do it to where they start saying select each person to learn more, or we can do it to, I think this is fine. We don't want to hold them up unnecessarily. If they read this instantly, we'll just give them the option to click it at this point. Okay? So here we are. And how I'm zooming, you notice how I'm zooming in and out on this timeline? The way to do that, because if I'm zooming out, now we can see more of the timeline, everything's smaller. If we zoom in, it's much bigger. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my mouse over this, over this timeline. So over this part right here, where it tells you what second you're at, where these little markers are, my pointer is over that. I'm holding down actually I don't even need to hold down the control key. All you need to do is zoom in and out with your mouse wheel. That's all. And I'm guessing if you're on a touchpad, you can probably just pinch and zoom. Emily, I'm going to add that question to the queue. We'll get to that. We'll get to that down the line. I want to make sure we can get this working though. So here's how we're going to make this work. So sometime in the last year, Storyline added this trigger. I'm going to show you, called jump to time / cue point. Okay. So this trigger lets us jump to a certain time on the timeline when the user does something. Okay, so let me show you how I'm going to make this work. I'm going to extend this timeline. And let's say right here, right after this audio ends, let's say this is where we start our Kyle piece. Okay? So I'm just going to click on this 4.5 second mark right here. And now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click now after putting my marker or playhead, I guess it's called. After putting my playhead at that point, I right click up here where it shows the time, and I'm going to select create cue point at playhead. Okay. So I'm going to click that now. Now when I click off of this, you see that little 1 right there? That's called a cue point. And we'll be able to jump the timeline to this cue point now that we've created it. So we can move it around, you see. If once we bring in human narration, if we need to move this, we can move it just by clicking and dragging. But when we add a trigger, we can say when someone clicks on this button, bring us to this cue point. Okay? So that cue point will be important. Now, I want to think about the best way to show you, the best order to show this. And we'll click on this cue point. We'll bring the playhead over to it because we want to add some new narration. Okay, so now that our playhead is right here, we're going to go back to the insert tab, and then we will go to audio and text to speech. So the reason we selected our playhead there first is because when we add this text to speech, it's going to get added wherever our playhead is. So I select text to speech. Now we want to talk about Kyle. So we will say, meet Kyle. Kyle is ipsum, and Kyle is lorem ipsum. Kyle is lorem, and Kyle, I'm just adding some Latin text. It's not important what we say, right? So meet Kyle. Kyle is lorem, and Kyle is ipsum. Not important what it says. So I'm going to press insert now. And now we can see we have this new audio added on our timeline. So what happens if we play this right now? Any guesses in the chat? What's going to happen if we play this slide right now? And good suggestion, Robbie. Robbie pointed out if we just press the C key on our keyboard, it will create a cue point wherever our playhead is. So I'm going to press C, and there we go. We have that cue point. So thank you, Robbie, for that suggestion. John agrees. Kyle is so ipsum. Nice. But just to show you what happens, let's play this right now.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Meet Kyle. Kyle is lorem and Kyle is ipsum.
Kyle is ipsum. Okay. So you see what happens. It's just going to play right through because we're not doing anything to actually stop the timeline. So what we need to do, it didn't stop, so we need to make it stop. So where do we want it to stop? We want it to stop as soon as it gets done saying select each person to learn more. Okay, so I'm going to add a new trigger. I'm going to say, we want to pause the timeline. So I mentioned this earlier, right? It's going to keep going unless we pause that timeline. So for this trigger, I'm changing the action to pause timeline on this slide. Not when the timeline starts, but when the timeline reaches, or no, not even when the timeline reaches. Let's do it when the media completes. So when the media completes text to speech 1. And that's what this is right here. Okay. So pause timeline on this slide when that first text-to-speech completes. So if we play this now, watch this. Now it will stop.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay. So now it relies on this user input. This is where the interactivity comes into play. So can anyone tell me, what do we want to do when someone selects this rectangle over Kyle? Now, the first temptation may be, Heather's asking, would you need to change this trigger if you replace the robot with a human voice? Yeah, you probably would. You would need to change it to whenever that other media completes. But we'll just imagine this is our final voiceover for now. But yeah, it does take some time to actually swap it out. It just maybe saves some potential rework. And I don't work that way now. I get the script signed off and approved before moving forward, but changes are inevitable sometimes. Jump to cue point. Perfect. Sandy is suggesting jump to another slide. This is where you could have a separate layer all about Kyle, but we are just doing it all in this single layer, single slide, just to really emphasize how the timeline works. But yeah, we'll jump to that cue point. Exactly, we made this cue point right where Kyle's part starts, so that's what we're going to jump to when someone selects this. So let's jump to time/cue point. You see by default, it wants to jump to a time. We will click on where it says time and change that to cue point. And now it's trying to bring us to this unassigned cue point. Why is that? Why is it not showing us our cue point? Oh, I need to do layer this slide. There we go. So we just needed to change the layer to this slide. Okay. Christy suggested adding a trigger to play the next text-to-speech. Christy, the problem with that, if we just play the audio, it's not going to have any of the visual changes that go along with it. So instead of only playing that audio, we need to make sure that we keep the timeline moving forward, because we're going to be moving things around on this slide based on where the timeline is. Okay? But good idea. I think other people may have thought that as well. But that isn't going to get us where we need to go. So we're going to jump to this cue point, not when the media completes, but when the user clicks on Kyle button. Okay? So I'm not sure if this will automatically start playing our timeline. Let's check it. We might need to add another trigger to resume the timeline. So let's see.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
And it didn't. So we do need to add that trigger to, so I'm going to select the Kyle button. I'm going to select this create new trigger button. And now I just need to add a trigger to resume the timeline when the user clicks Kyle button. Okay. So now this will jump to the cue point and it will resume the timeline. So if we did this successfully, it should now play that next audio. So let's check it out.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
And there we have it. So now we need to add some additional pieces. And I see we have 20 minutes left, so maybe I'm going to start moving a little bit more quickly here. But we need to start having these things kind of go off of the timeline. Okay. And this is the first time we have one of these sessions where we're talking about animation and the timeline, so maybe we need to run a little bit over. We'll see how this goes, but I want to drive home some of these points. These are very important, especially if you're new to working with this. So let's say we want this, select each person to learn more. Let's say we want it to like fly out. So we're going to go to the exit animations over here on the right. This is, exit animations. We want this to fly out off of the top of the screen. Actually, we'll just stick with this nice floating. We don't need to get too. Never mind. I'm choosing the extreme. We're flying out. Okay. So we want this to fly out to the top whenever we start learning about Kyle. Okay. Now, 0.75 seconds. We're going to go with 0.5 seconds. So this is, and these effect options are important because when we click this drop down, that's where we can change which direction it's flying. Okay. Now, it's very important understanding how this duration interacts with the timeline, okay? So let's look at the timeline where this thing is ending. So we'll say, so let's imagine, okay, we want it to fly out when this thing starts, so we'll just bring it right here. That's not how this works. It's going to start animating out this amount of time before the timeline ends. Does that make sense? So we can see if we end this timeline on 5 seconds, I don't know why it's not letting us go exactly to 5. It's like jumping around 5, but whatever. If this was ending at exactly 5 seconds, it's going to start animating out at 4.5 seconds. So this amount of time right here, that is the amount of time we have for it to fly out. Okay, so if you want it to be completely gone by the time this starts, you would bring it right here. If you want it to start animating out when this thing starts, you would have to bring it 0.5 seconds later. Okay? So we're going to do that just to emphasize this. We're going to bring it and let me just drive that home a bit more. If we took 1 second to fly out and we wanted to not start animating out until this new text-to-speech starts, we need to bring it 1 full second after this, because that 1 second is going to be the amount of time it takes for that thing to fly off of the screen. Okay, does everyone understand that, or are there any questions about that? Because that can have some pretty serious implications. Right here, it might not seem very important, but there are times when your understanding of that will if you don't understand that, it will kind of break your animation. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too off track. We only have about 15 minutes till the hour, so let's just build that piece. So that's going to fly out. We don't need Kelsey on screen anymore either, so we will have Kelsey fly out. Oh, that's the Kelsey button. So let me just hide this for now. So this is another thing when you're working with these animations. You can use this show hide button to show and hide things you don't need. So I'm going to hide this button. I'm going to select Kelsey now, and we're going to give Kelsey a fly out to the right animation, also for 0.5 seconds. Okay. So we need to go to the end of the timeline. We don't want Kelsey to be here this long. We want Kelsey to fly out. I really don't get why this is like so messed up. Like, I've never had it happen where when I expand this, it's like not actually going to the right spot on the playhead. You see how weird this is? Does anyone know why this is happening, or any ideas? I don't know. This is close enough for our purposes for now. We just want to see how this works. So these will both start flying out once this timeline starts. What do we want to do with Kyle now? We're going to probably want to show some text, but let's just see how this all works. I'm going to double click this button right here at the top to show everything. And I'm going to preview this now.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay, so it started flying out before the timeline stopped. So that's a big problem, obviously. So here's where our timeline is. So we need to make sure that there's at least 0.5 seconds after this before we start flying this thing out. I'm going to zoom in here. This is as far in as I can zoom. Okay, so we need to extend these two pieces a little bit further out. Again, I'm not sure why this is like messed up. Like, I've never had this happen before, but we're just going to make do with what we've got for now.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Still is coming out a little early. So I guess we'll do this. Actually, we'll just expand it out a little bit more.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay, we'll select Kyle.
Meet Kyle. Kyle is Loram and Kyle is Ipsum.
So that's what we wanted to see. So there we go. So we have those pieces done. I'm going to just start. I'm gonna talk as we go. So isn't clicking Kyle button the trigger for those things to fly out? No, Nicole, this is all based on the timeline. So when we click the Kyle button, look at the triggers. all that's doing is jumping to this cue point right here. Okay? So clicking Kyle jumps to the cue point. That's all. And the timeline stops right here. So clicking Kyle doesn't make those things fly out and fly in. The timeline is what makes those things fly out and fly in. So our triggers are all based on where the playhead is at on the timeline. Okay? Good. Now, let's say I'm going to want some new text to fly in here. I'm going to Control D to duplicate this. I want it to be positioned exactly the same. And I'm going to make this one, I'm going to change the title of this to Meet Kyle. Okay, and I want this to say Meet Kyle. And I'm just going to select it and I'm going to align it to the center. So now if we hide this text box beneath it, whoops, let's see. So now you can see Meet Kyle. We want this to fly in when Kyle appears. Okay, so I'm going to drag this forward on the timeline. We want it to start appearing as soon as this one disappears. Okay, so this one's going to fly out. This one's going to fly in. Let's just see. And I'm moving through this pretty quickly. Obviously, this would take a bit more time, but it's okay. We're going to see what we can do in this next amount of time. Meet Kyle. I want Kyle to go on a motion path. I feel like I don't have enough time to do this right now. Just let's see what we can do, okay? So I'm going to insert some lines. So I'm going to insert a shape and then this line right here. I'm going to drag it out from maybe right here with Kyle. And I want to add a text box. So this is where we'll say lorem, right? Kyle is lorem, Kyle is ipsum. What text size did we go with here? We have this button in the way. Size 28, okay. Just trying to keep that consistency. Just getting the positioning right. This line is pretty thin compared to how thick that stroke is. So I'm going to go to the Format tab. We're going to change the weight to, well, 8 is too big. Let's try, I think 5 will be good for our needs. And we will just change this to that same black color here. Playing around with the positioning. And I want to do the same thing when it says Kyle is ipsum. So I'm just going to drag this down. I'm holding down the control key to make a copy. I think we can just rotate this and flip it horizontally. Now it lines up pretty well. We have that same angle. And this is where we'll say that Kyle is ipsum. Okay, so now we just need to get the timing right. If we double click this text to speech, we can play it.
Kyle. Kyle is lorem and Kyle is ipsum.
So it says Kyle is lorem right here, right?
Kyle is lorem.
Kyle, this is where it says lorem.
And Kyle is ipsum.
Kyle is ipsum. So around right here on the wave is where we need these pieces to fade in. So I think right here is where you need to say Kyle is lorem. So I'm just going to take these two pieces and drag it forward, just like we've been doing. I want to add some animations to these lines. So I'm going to select the two lines. I'm going to go to the animations tab and I'm going to give it this wipe animation. We'll make it 0.5 seconds and we will wipe from the left. So that's going to make the line kind of like extend out from this point on the left to the right. And we can probably have this one start a little before it says lorem. Lorem will just have fade in, 0.5 seconds. And same thing with ipsum. I know I'm moving quickly. I just want to bring this further along. We're using the same principles we've been using. We're just adding animations and bringing these things to the right spot on the timeline. So Kyle is lorem, so I don't need to do the ipsum part. So we'll bring this, I think it was like down here, and this piece will be down here. So let's just see how this looks, okay? Not sure if it's going to be perfect, but let's see how it looks. Oh, and actually I need to make sure that I show everything so that those buttons appear.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay, so we'll select Kyle. And it did not work as we wanted it. Oh, I think the problem is because I moved this cue point over. So let's try this again. It jumped us to the cue point, which was, I think, well, let's just
This
see.
is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Okay. So obviously there are a couple of problems here. It wasn't timed super well, so we need to move them forward a little bit.
Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Okay, so you see I just pressed this little play button in the bottom left. The reason I've continued previewing it is because when I used to work on many projects like this, like in the past, this was always a little bit off, but that timing did seem a bit better. Okay, so Tracy is asking where the cue point for Kelsey goes. So that's what I was trying to get to. I want to show us what we can do once we get past this point. Okay, so we talk about Kyle, right? What I think we should do is once we talk about Kyle and the narration completes, we should fade out these pieces, maybe animate back in the other pieces. Like I'm trying to think about what we should do with the timeline because let me see here.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
So this is where we want the timeline to jump. So we need to make sure that wherever the Kyle narration ends, it brings us back to a screen that looks exactly like this. And then we can jump back on the timeline because this is interactive at this point. There are multiple ways we can do this. There always are. And as you can see, this is getting a bit complex. That's why layers would probably be the better way to deal with this. Daria is asking when we want to go back to the beginning after the initial narration. The reason we can't just jump back here without animating things back in is because it will be very abrupt, right? So Kelsey and this select each person will just like appear here instantly. And if we try to jump back to the point to where they animate in, that might work for Kelsey. Well, actually, it wouldn't work because this thing is going to start talking to us again. I don't think we need to hear that narration again. So let's see how we can do this. Okay. So we want these pieces to fade out. Let's make sure everything gets off the screen once this narration completes. Kyle is still on here. That's all going to fade out when we get to this point. I'm going to drag this stuff down. That narration completes. We don't need to see that stuff anymore, but we do want to probably bring Kelsey back in. Oh no. Oh, that's the button, right? How do we want to do this? So another thing with the buttons, like what I want to do is let me show you the problem with the buttons and why we want to hide them, okay? Because if right now, if we press this button without hiding it, it's just going to just keep bringing us back to that cue point.
This is
so
Kyle,
watch this.
and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
So if we click this,
Meet Kyle. Kyle
see
is
right now
Lorem
we
and
can
Kyle
still
is
click
Ipsum.
this.
Meet Kyle. Meet Kyle. Meet Kyle.
So that's
Kyle
why
is
we
Lorem
didn't
and
want
Kyle
to
is-
use
Meet
a
Kyle.
hotspot. So what we want to do is when someone clicks on this button, we're going to change the state of the button to hidden when the user clicks this button. Okay? And I want to do the same thing for this one. Change the state of this Kelsey button to hidden when the user clicks the Kelsey button. So now let's think. So when the Kyle part completes, we need to get back to that screen where we can select these different pieces. And the only way we're going to be able to do that, I think, is if we bring in another one of these objects. Okay, so bear with me. Again, we would probably want to use layers here, but I'm just going to show you how to do this before we hop off of this so you can see it all comes together. Okay, so this is where the pieces would fade out. I think we can have Kelsey fading back in right after. So this time we will have Kelsey fly in from the right. So we'll have her, because she flew out to the right, so we'll have her fly back in from the right. We do not need an exit animation here because we just want things to come back together. We have that 0.5 second. Okay, why is this doing this? Sorry, that was hidden, so it wasn't, or it's just not letting me move the timeline to the left because these things are trying to push it out. What is pushing? Okay, that group is what's pushing it out. So what I'm looking at right here, you notice these little arrows. If you can right click this and show it till the end, and it will persist until the end. It's not going to end early. So that's fine. So this group is what's not letting us shorten the timeline. So I'm going to bring this down, bring this back here. We honestly only need this to be on the timeline for this 0.5 seconds because that's how long we're animating the things back in for. So let's try that. We can show this until the end. Actually, no, we won't. This is fine. Okay, so Kelsey comes back in. We want this to be perfectly aligned with this other Kelsey button. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to align it to the top and then align it to the left. So now they're perfectly overlapped. So Kelsey comes back in, and now we want this select each person to learn more. We want to make a duplicate of that so that that can come back in. Okay, so there's that. We will shorten this a bit, and we will go to the animations. We don't need it to animate out. We just want it to fly in from the top. And we need to make sure we get that alignment right. So again, I'm selecting them both. I'll align it to the top, align it to the left so that they're perfectly overlapped. And now what we can do, I think at this point, is we can jump to a certain point in the timeline. So let me show you what we're going to do. I want to make another cue point. Okay, so I want to bring a cue point right before this media ends. So I'm going to bring it right here because again, the timeline will pause when this cue point, when this media ends. So I'm going to make a cue point right here. I'm going to press C. Now we have that third cue point apparently. That's where I'm going to bring them once this entrance animation completes. So either of these would work. But let's say we'll just do it based off of this group 3. So watch this. I'm going to create a trigger. I'm going to jump to time or cue point. We're going to jump to a cue point on this slide. Cue point 3, that's exactly what we want. Not when the user clicks, but when the animation completes on this group 3 entrance animation. Something I just noticed, this is a new feature. We could have optionally selected to play the timeline when we jump to that cue point. So I actually didn't need that second trigger I added earlier. And I'm sorry if I'm losing some people. I know I'm just trying to move through this quickly. And if you're new, it's probably a lot. Layers would be easier. Timeline is kind of a nightmare for this. I just wanted to really show off how these different cue points could work. I think this is something that you would probably want to watch again to see exactly what I'm doing if you are new. So now what we're doing is once these other pieces animate back in, now we're just jumping back to that cue point where these things are already in that exact space. So we won't see these instances of the object, we will see the earlier ones. Not sure if this is going to work exactly how we want it to, and there are still some things we need to do, okay? So do you remember we changed the state of those buttons to hidden? What we need to do before jumping back to this cue point is we need to change the state of those buttons back to normal, right? So because we want them to be able to click them again. So we're going to change it back to normal when this animation completes. Animation entrance. And then same thing, we want to change the state of the Kyle button back to normal when the animation completes. Okay? So let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. Let's see. And I think these two pieces, if they're not displaying until the end, they will, let's just do this. I'm going to pause the timeline when the timeline gets right here because I don't want these things to disappear. But I also don't want to display them to the end because we need to draw the timeline out further because that's where we would jump when someone selects Kelsey, then we would play the next pieces. We're not going to build out the Kelsey side here. I just want to see if we can get this one piece working because you would be able to just duplicate that for the next. So I'm going to add a trigger to pause the timeline. Oh, well, then I would have to play it again. So I'm just gonna display these until the end for now, okay? We wouldn't want that to work because we're gonna need to add more after that, but that's fine. Let's see if this works for demo purposes.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
All right, so let's select Kyle.
Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Okay, we almost had it, but for some reason, Kelsey just kind of flew out of here a bit too early. So let me look. What happened to Kelsey? So we brought us back to this cue point. Let's see. And let me hide and then show everything. Let's see if this works.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more.
Okay, let's select Kyle.
Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Really not sure why Kelsey is disappearing at this point, but I think we need to figure it out. Oh, she has a flyout animation right here. So then why isn't this other one appearing? Okay, she's flying out. Let's see.
This is Kyle, and this is Kelsey. Select each person to learn more. Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum. Meet Kyle. Kyle
There we
is
go.
Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Looks like we got it. Okay. So it took me a lot of fiddling to get this right. I think we got pretty far in an hour though. I hope that this highlighted some things. Let's just look at it one more time. We can just do an endless loop of this now because all it's doing is bringing us to different points in the timeline.
Meet Kyle. Kyle is Lorem and Kyle is Ipsum.
Okay. Kelsey's cute. Yeah, we would still need to do basically what we did for Kyle, but for Kelsey, it would be that same approach. We would just extend the timeline out here at the end. We would need to pause it, resume it when we jump back to the earlier cue point. Yeah, we would basically just need to expand this out, add some narration for Kelsey, add these pieces for Kelsey, time it right, and then jump to the appropriate cue point when someone selects that button. But let me stop sharing now. That was a lot. I wasn't sure how far we would get in this amount of time, but yeah, this is the first time we dove into timeline, cue points, and narration and timing things, and even animations. So I'm glad we covered this. It has been missing from the last 5 workshops. Excited to see what you guys are going to vote on 2 weeks from now, but these sessions are always fun. I get confused about what I'm doing sometimes, but we got there. So nice. I'm glad it helped. Yeah, layers. I think we do need to get into something with layers. So I'll make sure that the new option I add for 2 weeks from now will have something that is layers heavy, and we'll try to work those in because we haven't been working much with layers either. So thank you, everyone. Next week, we're doing a session on storyline in JavaScript with Jolt Ola. This isn't going to be a technical session. It's just going to be like talking about what's possible and what he has done. So don't miss that one either. But we'll be live in 2 weeks at the same time slot on Thursday for another storyline workshop just like this. So I will see you all soon, and thanks for hanging out here today.